As far as we know, the first creatures to exist in the Warcraft universe are the first ones. They ordered the entire cosmology of Warcraft into 6 cosmological powers: light, void, life, death, order, and disorder. There is also a 7th cosmological power that stands in opposition of these 6, but we know very little about it. Each of these powers have their own realms of existence, but the place where they all coalesce and are channeled as types of magic is called reality, and this is where most of the Warcraft plot takes place. Everything in existence essentially runs on a code called Language of the First Ones. What happened to these first ones is currently unknown. Shadowlands is a place where mortal souls go when they die. Here they are judged by a creature known as the Arbiter. The first Arbiter was called Zovaal. He sent out souls to afterlives as dictated by the laws of the first ones. He didn't really like these laws, as they judged souls out of context and separated families all the time, so he decided to secretly obtain the 5 sigils of the Shadowlands, which would allow him entry into a place called Zereth Mortis, from where he could reshape reality as he saw fit. The Pantheon of Death, literal gods of the Shadowlands to whom Zovaal also belonged, found this out and imprisoned him in the Maw, the darkest place in the Shadowlands where only the most horrible of souls would go. They bound him in the Maw using domination magic, which was the twisted form of the language of the first ones that can be used to enslave beings to your will. In his place they put in a mechanical arbiter so that it wouldn't get any smart ideas such as those that Zovaal had. Titans, beings of order, are born from world souls which are concentrated arcane magic around which planets started to form. A few of fully grown world souls would unite into the Pantheon of Order, and they would seek out others like them, ordering planets along the way and creating Titan facilities that kept watch over the worlds they passed, even if they didn't have world souls inside of them. Their main antagonists during this task were the powers of the Void, specifically the Old Gods, who are parasitic creatures sent out by the Void Lords, the highest deities of the Void, which would burrow deep into planets and corrupt world souls from within. One of these worlds was Azeroth, where they created a few Titan facilities, imprisoned the Old Gods burrow there, and took care of the raging elementals that were at war. They made their Titanic Watchers who would guard the world while the Titans were away. One of the Old Gods, Isharj, was so powerful that it literally could not be imprisoned nor killed, as none of the other Old Gods could have been, as their deaths would cause too much damage to Azeroth, as the Titans were about to find out, because they had to literally pluck Isharj out of Azeroth, causing it immense damage and leaving a big magical scar in its place. Azeroth seems to be the strongest Titan to ever exist, but she is not born yet. Everything seemed fine. Titanic Watchers and their leaders, the Keepers, did their duty and all was well. There was a race of creatures now known as proto-dragons that dominated the northern parts of Azeroth. However, one of these dragons presented a danger to all life on Azeroth, a proto-dragon known as Galakrond. Galakrond was the biggest proto-dragon to ever exist, and his hunger was such that he would even eat other proto-dragons. So the proto-dragons united, and with the help of a Titan Keeper called Tyr, they were able to defeat Galakrond. The proto-dragons who were involved would be blessed by the Titans after most of the Keepers asked for their blessings, and the leaders of these 5 Dragonflights would come to be known as the Dragon Aspects. Red Dragonflight would watch over the life energies of Azeroth. The Blue Dragonflight would watch over magic, the Green Dragonflight would keep watch over everything natural, the Bronze Dragonflight would watch over the time ways, and lastly, the Black Dragonflight would watch over the earth itself, and the old gods buried within. One of their new abilities as dragons was Visage Form, which is an innate power of dragons to shapeshift into other races. This power would be used throughout the history of Azeroth to communicate with younger races, but it would also be used for more sinister means, as you will see soon enough. Not all proto-dragons were so accepting of the Titans' gifts, so a group called the Primalists infused themselves with the powers of the elements and declared war on the dragon aspects. They saw dragons and dragon aspects as traitors to their species, since dragons originally have ancestry from the elementals, and as you know, elementals and the Titans were at war, as I mentioned earlier, so they saw this as an act of treason. To aid them in this war, Nel'Darion, the leader of the Black Dragonflight, created the Drak'tir. The war was won by the Dragon Aspects, and the Primalists were imprisoned on the Dragon Isles, from where the Dragon Aspects kept watch over the world. Drakthir would at some point fall into a slumber that would last thousands of years. During their ordering of the worlds, Titans also faced demons and creatures known as Dreadlords. The Dreadlords serve Sire Denathrius, who in turn serves the banished Arbiter Zovaal, and act as spies. They would infuse themselves with a type of magic to the point where they became a creature of that type of magic. So for example, they would infuse themselves with Fel, which is disorder magic, until they became demons, not creatures of death anymore. Their espionage was so successful that at one point the Light even waged war on death because of it. Sargeras would slowly lose his mind fighting the Void, just because their corruption was so immense, along with some whispers from the Dreadlords. So Sargeras decided that it was better to snuff out all life in the universe rather than it falling to the Void. He even slashed a planet in two because of old god corruption he saw on it. Then he released all demons from a prison he kept them in, called this new demonic army the Burning Legion, and started what was known as the Burning Crusade. He almost killed all other titans, though he would capture their souls before they could make their way back to the realms of order. If you kill one of the magical creatures from some of the 6 realms, their soul would return to their respective realm, where they would regenerate and come back. So when a titan dies, it would usually go to the realms of order, stay there a while, and then return to reality. Same goes for demons or any other creature of any other type of magic. Sargeras would recruit denizens of many worlds by force or by deception. Among these worlds was Argus, where a race known as Eredar was ruled by 3 leaders, Kil'jaeden, Archimonde, and Velen. Sargeras approached the Eredar and promised them great powers. Kil'jaeden and Archimonde accepted almost right away, while Velen knew something was not right. So Velen and his allies escaped, while the now corrupted Eredar would try to stop them. Kil'jaeden was especially enraged by this turn of events, and promised to chase Velen and his exiled Eredar, now known as the Draenei, however far they ran. The Draenei would run for thousands of years, they would inhabit a few worlds, but they would always be found by the Legion. Argus was significant for the Legion for another reason as well. It housed a world soul. The Dreadlords approached Sargeras and told him that they could twist Argus into a creature of death using death magic, which would regenerate demonic souls much faster than if they were to simply die and then wait in the twisting nether for their return. Unbeknownst to Sargeras, of course, this plan would ultimately serve Zovaal's purposes. Back on Azeroth, Titan Keepers and Watchers would be taking care of old god prisons, however they failed to fully contain their corruption after the deaths of the Titans, which allowed Yogg-Saron, one of the imprisoned old gods on Azeroth, to cast the Curse of the Flesh upon Titan Watchers, whose stone bodies would slowly turn fleshy. Rykul were the main soldiers in the armies in the service of the Titans on Azeroth. Besides turning fleshy, they also started having malformed, small and weak babies. The law was to kill all these weak children, however some Rykul parents decided to keep them safe in the lands to the southeast, following Tyr and a few other Titan Keepers. These malformed descendants of the Rykul would come to be known as the Humans. Near the place where the first humans settled was Uldaman, a Titan facility which housed Mecha Gnomes and Earthen, who would then also be affected with the Curse of the Flesh and would come to be known as Gnomes and Dwarves. On their way to the new Promised Lands, a couple of powerful minions of the old gods would stand in their way. Tyr would sacrifice himself for their safety, and from then on, those lands would come to be known as Tirisfal Glades and would serve as an origin point for the 7 human kingdoms. Now earlier I said that there was a scar where Isharj was burrowed after it was plucked out by the Titans. The scar made a magical well of sorts that attracted the Dark Trolls. The energies of this well would transform the Dark Trolls into the first Night Elves, who would build one of the largest empires on Azeroth to ever exist, an empire led by Queen Azshara around this newfound so-called Well of Eternity. It also gave Night Elves immortality. Queen Azshara and her advisor Xavius made contact with Sargeras himself, who promised them immense power if they let the Legion into Azeroth. So they did, and so starts the first invasion of Azeroth, also known as War of the Ancients, which would have catastrophic consequences for the world. Now, we need to take a break and explain why Sargeras needed Azshara to open the way for his armies. You see, the main problem Sargeras has with Azeroth and why he cannot take it is because he doesn't actually know where it is, so he would always have to rely on portals and could never get to Azeroth himself. The big players on the rebellion side of the War of the Ancients were the Stormrage twins, Malfurion and Illidan, and a priestess known as Tyrande Whisperwind. They fought the Legion together, albeit in their own differing ways. Malfurion followed the ways of the demigod Cenarius and started training the Druids, which were heavily tied with nature and would channel its powers. Tyrande followed the ways of the night elf goddess Elune, who also happens to belong in the Pantheon of the Realms of Life, while Illidan took on demonic powers and adopted a very ends justify the means type of attitude. The 5 Dragonflights were also involved in this conflict, which took a turn for the worse when Nel'Darion, the leader of the Black Dragonflight, created a powerful artifact known as Dragon Soul, later known as Demon Soul, which was meant to be used against the Legion. What no one knew at the time was that Nel'Darion was corrupted by the old gods, and he planned to use this artifact to not only destroy the Legion, but anyone who stood in his way. Calling himself Deathwing, he attempted to bring his plan to fruition, but was stopped by the forces of Azeroth, not before causing massive deaths in the Blue Dragonflight, who especially felt the wounds of his betrayal. He ran away and hid for thousands of years after the war, getting even more maddened by the whispers of the old gods. The Legion was defeated, but not before the Well of Eternity, which was used as a portal for the Legion, blew up and destroyed the mega-continent of Kalimdor in an event known as the Sundering, during which Kalimdor was separated into multiple smaller continents. Azshara and her most loyal followers would be saved by the old god N'Zoth, who would turn them into the Naga. Illidan Stormrage preserved a couple of vials of the well's waters and used one to create a new Well of Eternity atop Mount Hyjal, but for his actions during the war he was imprisoned forever. Above this new Well of Eternity, the Druids planted the world tree Nordrassil, which, when empowered with dragon magic, continued the Night Elf immortality. The Night Elf society would from then on be led by Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind, and their society would shift away from magic and focus on druidism and priesthood. There was still a sect of magic-using Night Elves called the Highborne left after the Sundering, and at one point they would speak out against the Night Elven leadership and would even fight them, causing them to be exiled to the seas, where they would eventually find the continent that would later come to be known as the Eastern Kingdoms. Their skin paled from being without magic for so long, and they were starting to weaken, even losing their immortality. They were so used to magic that they were addicted to it. But their leader, Dath'Remar Sunstrider, had a plan. He stole one of the vials of the waters of the Well of Eternity that Illidan took and used it to create the Sunwell. Around the Sunwell, the now called High Elves would form the kingdom of Quel'Thalas. The Dragon Isles would be shrouded from the rest of the world during the Sundering, even from the dragon aspects themselves, and the Titan Watchers on the island would fall to slumber until the land called to them again. The High Elves made contact with the humans and even taught them magic. The humans would then create a group of powerful magi known as the Council of Tirisfal. They would infuse one of them with all their powers, and this chosen one would be called the Guardian of Tirisfal. They would protect the world from threats such as demons. About 1,000 years before the First War, the Guardian of Tirisfal was a woman known as Aegwynn. She sensed a threat coming from Northrend, and while investigating would face a few demons, but also before her eyes an avatar of Sargeras would fall from the skies. She defeated the avatar of Sargeras and locked him up beneath an old Night Elf temple, but not before he sent out a little of his powers into her. Being the guardian of Tirisfal, Aegwynn lived for a very, very long time. Wanting to keep the title of the guardian within her bloodline, she would have a child called Medivh, upon who would the powers of Sargeras be transferred to when he was born. unbeknownst to Aegwynn. Medivh would make fast friends with Prince Lane Vryn of the Kingdom of Stormwind and Stormwind's champion Anduin Lothar. However, during his adolescence, something horrible would happen. Medivh would have a horrible fever and would seek out the help of his father. But when the two just touched, a burst of energies came forth, killing his father and putting Medivh in a 20-year-long coma. After he awoke, Medivh was not himself anymore, as noticed by his friends, Anduin Lothar and now the king of Stormwind, Lane Vryn. What no one knew at the time was that Sargeras possessed Medivh and was planning to use him for the next Legion invasion. Throughout the 13,000 years since they escaped their homeworld, the Draenei were constantly running from the Legion. They would eventually land on a world they would call Draenor, and here they lived mostly in peace with the creatures of the New World, including the Orcs. The Orcs were divided into multiple clans, inhabiting various regions of Draenor. A big thing in Orcish culture was their pact with the elements, as many Orc clans would practice shamanism. All was going well until one day Kil'jaeden got word at where the Draenei were. He quickly hatched a plan to turn the Orcs against the Draenei. He approached Ner'zhul, a powerful Orc shaman, in a vision. In this vision, Kil'jaeden appeared as Rulkan, Ner'zhul's mate who died some time prior. Kil'jaeden warned Ner'zhul that the Draenei would prove to be the end of the Orcs and that they had to act preemptively and destroy them. So Ner'zhul gathered many Orc clans and together they would start to strike at Draenei villages, killing anyone in their way. Over time they would notice that the elements were beginning to abandon them, so Ner'zhul investigated a little bit and found out that the vision of Rulkan was just a trick by Kil'jaeden. But before he managed to act, an ambitious Orc and apprentice to Ner'zhul called Gul'dan found out about his little investigation and with the help of Kil'jaeden took over Ner'zhul's role. Gul'dan then formed the First Horde, uniting all the clans in their war against the Draenei and installing Blackhand of the Blackrock clan as the war chief of the Horde, while Gul'dan pulled the strings from the shadows with his aptly named Shadow Council. Because the elements were beginning to leave them, Gul'dan brought in fell magic into Orcish society, training warlocks in huge numbers, which in turn caused the world of Draenor to wither. The next step in Gul'dan's and Kil'jaeden's plans were to have the Orcs drink the blood of a powerful demon known as Mannoroth, which turned the Orcs green and gave them an almost infinite bloodlust. The first of the Orcs to drink the blood of Mannoroth was the chieftain of the Warsong clan, Grom Hellscream. Almost all the Orc clans drank the blood, with the big exception being the Frostwolf clan, who would slowly begin to get ostracized from the now savage Orc society. The Draenei never stood a chance and were quickly mostly wiped out. With no enemies to fight, the Orcs were in a perfect position to be used as weapons for Sargeras' return to Azeroth. So Sargeras orchestrated a plan between Medivh and Gul'dan to open up a rift between the two worlds, a portal that would come to be known as the Dark Portal. As a last act of cruelty, the Horde used Draenei souls as fuel for the Dark Portal, and their bones as pavement for the road leading from the massive Hellfire Citadel to the Dark Portal. And so the Orcs invaded Azeroth, starting the First War. The Orcs caught humanity totally by surprise, totally wrecking everything in sight. Right after crossing, Gul'dan exiled the Frostwolf clan to the frosty mountains of Alterac and cemented his grip over the Orc clans. The exiled Frostwolves still had contacts within the Horde, specifically a prolific Orc warrior known as Orgrim from the legendary Doomhammer line. Orgrim Doomhammer would visit the Frostwolf leaders, Durathan and Draka, in the mountains of Alterac, who would warn him about Gul'dan. After their meeting, Orgrim's bodyguards, who turned out to be Gul'dan's assassins and spies, would come back and kill Durathan and Draka while leaving their newborn son out in the snow. Shortly after they left, the baby was found by a human called Blackmore, who took the baby Orc with him to a place called Durnhold Keep. The Orcs would slowly make their way towards Stormwind, the capital of the Kingdom of Stormwind, and during this time a mage student from the Kirin Tor called Khadgar was sent to Karazhan, Medivh's big spooky tower, who Medivh took a liking to. A Horde emissary would also visit Karazhan, a half-orc, half-Draenei woman called Garona. but instead of doing whatever the Horde wanted her to do, she boinked with Medivh. They may or may not have a child, it's not certain if their son is still canon in the lore, so we will not talk about him right now. Khadgar would be the first to find out the corruption of Medivh, and he, along with Garona, Anduin Lothar and a handful of human champions, would strike at Karazhan and would manage to kill Medivh, but not before Medivh tried to drain the life out of Khadgar, artificially aging him decades in advance. With his dying breath, Medivh, possessed by Sargeras still, sent out a curse on the land around Karazhan, which would thereafter be known as Deadwind Pass. In the Horde, after a failed siege of Stormwind, there were whispers of dissent, and Orgrim Doomhammer would challenge Blackhand to a Mak'gora, a duel to the death, which Doomhammer won, becoming the second war chief. He made it his mission to rid the Horde of Gul'dan's corruption. Garona befriending the humans of Stormwind was not against Gul'dan's plans. He actually preferred her close to humans, so as the Horde was approaching and breaking through the gates of Stormwind for the second time, Gul'dan mind-controlled Garona and forced her to assassinate King Lane Wrynn, right in front of his son, the young Prince Varian. The Horde would then break into the city and burn it to rubble, ending the first war with a decisive Horde victory. The survivors of Stormwind, including Prince Varian, would be led across the seas by Anduin Lothar, all the way to the northern kingdom of Lordaeron in Tirisfal Glades. Orgrim Doomhammer was ready to slay Gul'dan, but then Gul'dan showed him his bargaining chip, creatures known as Death Knights. These first-generation Death Knights were created by infusing the souls of fallen Orc warlocks into dead Stormwind soldiers. The first of the Death Knights was called Teron Gorfiend, and he was raised from a soul of the warlock Terongor. This bought Gul'dan some time, for now he had a new mission: find the tomb of Sargeras, the place underneath an elven temple where Aegwynn buried the fallen avatar of Sargeras. Survivors of Stormwind would meet up with the leaders of the other kingdoms in the Eastern Kingdoms. The meeting took place in the capital city, that's actually the name of the city, in Lordaeron, where the first alliance was formed, consisting of all 7 human kingdoms. All refugees would be allowed to live in Lordaeron underneath this alliance, and the Prince of Stormwind Varian Wrynn would spend his childhood here, making a close friendship with the Prince of Lordaeron, a child named Arthas. It wasn't only the human kingdoms who were in this alliance. The Dwarves of Khazmodan and Gnomes of Gnomeregan would join as well as a contingent of Elven Rangers led by Alleria Windrunner, though the Elves were still not officially in the alliance. Anduin Lothar was named the supreme commander of their armies, and a new order was established as the elite force of the alliance, the Order of the Silver Hand, warrior priests known as paladins who would use the powers of the light to smite their enemies. The Horde was not fooling around either. They got the Amani Trolls, an ancestral enemy of Quel'Thalas, to join them on the condition that during this new war the Trolls would be given the kingdom of Quel'Thalas. The Dragonmaw clan would also be guided by Deathwing, who was now back, towards the Demon Soul, which they used to enslave the Red Dragonflight, even their leader Alexstrasza, and use them against the Alliance. With the copious amounts of gold obtained from their victories during the First War, the Horde was also able to pay a large amount of money to the Goblin Steamweedle cartel, who supplied them with a lot of new tech that would be used in the next war. The Horde would make their way north, both by sea and by land, tearing everything in its way with the might of dragons. Orgrim had one goal in mind: destroy Lordaeron and finish the humans forever. This time, however, the Alliance was prepared and had a couple of victories themselves. One of the first paladins, Turalyon, proved himself a capable fighter and would become the second in command to Anduin Lothar. They also faced treachery among the ranks, as the kingdom of Alterac would allow passage to the Horde, for which they were punished by having martial law imposed upon them. The Amani Trolls really wanted to destroy Quel'Thalas, and Doomhammer knew that if he still wanted their support, he had to give the kingdom to them, so the Horde set their sights upon the Elven Kingdom. The battle was fierce, but eventually the Alliance came up north and helped defeat the Horde. King Anasterian Sunstrider, leader of the High Elves at the time, had no choice but to join the Alliance, who saved the day, and started supplying them with much more than just dozens of rangers here and there. Now the Alliance had the full might of Quel'Thalas behind them, and would start to beat back the Horde. Orgrim Doomhammer called for a retreat, but the Amani trolls would not want to leave. Gul'dan promised Doomhammer that he and his followers could break through Elves' magical barriers, but he needed some more time. Doomhammer was not convinced, but still he gave Gul'dan 3 days and took the majority of the horde, without the trolls though, to lay siege to the capital city of Lordaeron. Gul'dan had no interest in helping the horde, and he set sail shortly after towards the tomb of Sargeras, which was his primary goal. The horde was warned about this treachery, and so now a contingent of them were chasing after Gul'dan, while the rest were preparing to strike at the capital city. Gul'dan managed to reach and enter the tomb of Sargeras, but was ripped apart by demons shortly, while his clan was devastated by the rest of the horde. A warlock found Gul'dan's head, believing it to be a source of great magic, but after his death the skull would switch hands many times. We'll get back to it in a bit. The siege of Lordaeron was a failure, and the horde started retreating further south. Doomhammer ordered further reinforcements from Draenor, so he started taking his army south, and he would meet the reinforcements at the base of the Blackrock Mountain. It was here where the final battle of the Second War took place. The Alliance and Horde clashed at the base of the mountain. Doomhammer thought that if he killed Anduin Lothar, the body of Alliance would die without a head. So he made his way towards Lothar and managed to kill him. His plan was not a success though, as Turalyon rallied the army of the Alliance and kept their morale up, managing to secure a victory for the Alliance. The Alliance however did not kill the Orcs, they imprisoned them in internment camps. Some Orcs managed to flee further south towards the Dark Portal, led by Terran Gorefiend. This was a mistake as the forces of the Alliance followed them to find out the location of where the Orcs poured into Azeroth in the first place. Finally, they found the Dark Portal where a huge fight took place. However, the Horde was ultimately successful in their escape. The Alliance then summoned Khadgar, who managed to mostly close the portal, but a small rift remained. This decisive victory for the Alliance marked the end of the Second War. The relations between the Alliance nations would sour over the years, but it was still holding. Illyria and Turalyon fell in love during the course of the Second War and would have a child. Stormwind City would finally be rebuilt, bringing about the return of the kingdom. The Alliance would also build Netherguard Keep to keep watch over the rift that still linked the two worlds. The Horde would be licking their wounds on Draenor until Terran Gorefiend approached Ner'zhul, and together they hatched a plan to reform the Horde and to open new portals to unknown worlds that they could then take over. For this, however, they needed a few artifacts from Azeroth, so Ner'zhul opened the Dark Portal again, using the Skull of Gul'dan that ended up in his possession. They also made an unlikely ally. Deathwing approached Terran Gorefiend once the Horde was back on Azeroth and made a deal with him. He would help the Horde with obtaining the artifacts of power if the Horde gave safe passage to some mysterious cargo and the Skull of Gul'dan. This cargo was a bunch of black dragon eggs that he wanted to hide on Draenor. The Horde accepted. The Alliance tried to stop the Orcs, but they ultimately failed, prompting King Terenas of Lordaeron to call upon Alliance arms again. Led by champions such as Turalyon, Illyria Windrunner, and Khadgar, the Alliance expedition was formed, with the sole purpose of going beyond the Dark Portal into Draenor and stop the Orcish Horde once and for all. The Alliance expedition would search Draenor for the artifacts, including the Skull of Gul'dan, which they learned was in Deathwing's possession. They made a pact with the creatures known as Grons, who helped them fight Deathwing, where Khadgar did a really cool spell and managed to defeat Deathwing, who quickly ran away, while the Alliance took the skull. They also obtained the Book of Medivh, one of the artifacts stolen by the Horde. They would chase the Horde to the east, eventually reaching the Temple of Karabor, an old Draenei monastery that the Horde repurposed into their last stand. Seeing no other choice as the Alliance was closing in on the now called Black Temple, Ner'zhul cast a spell with the remaining artifacts atop the temple. This spell went horribly wrong, and massive portal storms would open all over Draenor. To stop what damage this would cause to Azeroth, Khadgar closed the Dark Portal using the Book of Medivh and the Skull of Gul'dan. He sent both artifacts back to Azeroth with a Griffin Rider who managed to pass through the portal in the last second, while the Alliance expedition remained stranded on Draenor. As the portal storm ravaged Draenor, Ner'zhul would pass through one of the portals, only to be caught by Kil'jaeden. he still had plans for Ner'zhul. In the aftermath of the Portal Storm, Draenor would become a floating piece of land in the twisting nether. From then on, it would come to be known as Outland. Most of the Alliance expedition remained on Outland, however some, such as Turalyon and Alleria Windrunner, would go missing. The Alliance on Outland was left to fend for themselves, as were the Orcs that were stranded on Azeroth. In the years that came, Deathwing would hide among the Alliance after managing to flee Draenor before its destruction as a human noble, who sowed dissent among the nations, who further drifted apart. The Kingdom of Gilneas would leave the Alliance, erecting a huge wall called the Greymane Wall, sealing itself off from the outsiders. A band of heroes including a mage named Ronin and Verissa Windrunner, the youngest sister of Alleria Windrunner, would free the Red Dragonflight and destroy the Demon Soul. Deathwing would also try to stop them, but with the help of other dragon aspects, the band of heroes was successful in defeating the Black Dragon. Lord Blackmoor would raise the young Frostwolf orc child he found during the First War. He would be named Thrall, and he was educated in the ways of the humans, while also being a gladiator and kept in a cage in Durnhold Keep, which also served as an internment camp for the orcs captured in the aftermath of the Second War. Wanting to find out about his heritage, Thrall escaped with the help of a girl called Taretha, who lived nearby and who was also an unwilling mistress to Blackmoor. In his travels, Thrall would find out about his Frostwolf origin. He would meet orcish legends such as Grom Hellscream, who was the first orc to drink the demon blood and also felt enormous guilt about it ever since. He would also meet the Frostwolf Shaman Drekthar and Orgrim Doomhammer, who escaped from the Alliance. Together they would free many orcs from internment camps, but during one battle Orgrim Doomhammer was mortally wounded, and with his final breath he gave young Thrall his armor and the Doomhammer, as well as the mantle of War Chief. To honor the legacy of Doomhammer, Thrall and the freedom fighters of the Horde charged at Durnhold Keep and asked Blackmoor to surrender. In response, Blackmoor threw the severed head of Taretha as the young war chief. Battle ensued, Blackmoor was killed, and the orcs of Durnhold were liberated. Thrall would continue liberating orcs and reforming the Horde in the years that came. Along the way he would also meet Tyrion, a paladin who helped save an orc named Aetrig from execution even after risking treason. Thrall allowed Tyrion to live, and this would be the first sign of the cooperation that could be done between the Horde and the Alliance. Stormwind would soon fully be rebuilt by the Stonemasons Guild, and Varian would come into adulthood and the position of the King of Stormwind. He would take a queen, a woman named Tiffin, and together they would have a son, Anduin Wrynn, named after Anduin Lothar, who bravely led the Stormwind refugees north. Deathwing's daughter, Onyxia, was in human form posing as a noble, and she would stir trouble with the Stonemasons Guild, severely cutting their pay, causing them to riot in the streets. Varian and Tiffin would try to come to some compromise with them, even going out into the streets to talk with them. During one of these talks, a stone from the crowd hit Queen Tiffin in the head, killing her. The Stonemasons Guild would flee Stormwind after the King's vengeance came upon them. They would run to Westfall, where they formed one of the most notorious gangs of Stormwind, the Defias Brotherhood. King Varian would fall into a deep depression, neglecting his young son Anduin throughout most of the prince's childhood. Because of this depression, King Varian Wrynn would be gone from any world affairs for the next pretty much decade, including the Third War, which was just about to begin. Throughout all this time, Kil'jaeden tortured the spirit of Ner'zhul. Disappointed with how the Orc project turned out, the Legion needed something new to usher in their next invasion of Azeroth. This is what brought up the idea of the Undead Scourge. Dreadlords approached Kil'jaeden with artifacts that they smuggled out of the Shadowlands at the behest of Zovaal: the Helm of Domination, a set of armor, and a rune blade called Frostmourne. The plan was to have Ner'zhul be bound within the armor set and to bring upon the Plague of Undeath, which would turn the denizens of Azeroth into mindless undead at Ner'zhul's will, who was supposed to serve Kil'jaeden. Ner'zhul would from then on be known as the Lich King. The Plague of Undeath was also brought from the Shadowlands and was ultimately a tool for Zovaal. Kil'jaeden sent Ner'zhul back into Azeroth, where he landed at the Ice-Crown Glacier. The plague needed to be spread first, so the Lich King reached out to an ambitious mage known as Kel'Thuzad, who would then become the leader of the newfound Cult of the Damned. They would train necromancers and spread the plague of undeath upon the northern kingdoms. Medivh's soul wandered throughout reality, and he would see that the Legion was planning to do something with the plague of undeath. So his spirit reached out to his mother Aegwynn, who brought his spirit back to Azeroth so that he could warn everyone of the coming Legion invasion and that they all must unite and sail west to the ancient lands of Kalimdor. Simply being called the Prophet, Medivh would visit many factions, including the mages of Kirin Tor and also Lordaeron, but he would always be rejected. He also approached Thrall in a dream, and Thrall was the first one to listen to him. So Thrall collected his forces, reunited with Grom Hellscream, who happened to be captured, and stole human ships to sail to Kalimdor. Along the way they met Darkspear trolls led by Sen'jin on an island near the Maelstrom, a powerful vortex left in place where the Well of Eternity once was. Sen'jin died in the battle against the Naga that was ongoing at the time, and his son and successor Vol'jin joined the Horde for Thrall's help during the battle. Back in the Eastern Kingdoms, King Terenas sent out his son, Prince Arthas, and Uther the Lightbringer, one of the first paladins, to investigate the plague that was spreading throughout the human settlements. They would later be joined by Jaina Proudmoore, daughter of the Lord Admiral of Kultiras, one of the human kingdoms, and a mage student in Kirin Tor's capital of Dalaran. Not only that, but she was pretty much the only love interest Arthas had in his life, and they shared some time together before departing because of their duties. Now reunited, they found out that the Cult of the Damned was using grain shipments to spread the plague. They faced Kel'Thuzad and his necromancers and promptly killed them, though Kel'Thuzad assured Prince Arthas that he would be back. Eventually their forces reached the city of Stratholme that had already distributed plagued grain, and it was only a matter of time before the plague took them all. Arthas decided that the entire city had to be purged, even if it meant killing all innocents, men, women and children. Jaina and Uther and a portion of their forces were completely against this and left Arthas on his own. Feeling betrayed, he did exactly what he set out to do. He killed everyone in Stratholme. During this purge, he was constantly taunted by the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis, who told Arthas to seek him out in Northrend, where Arthas would meet his true destiny. Arthas did exactly what Mal'Ganis wanted him to do. He took some troops and went up north. In the aftermath of the purge of Stratholme, Jaina and Uther came back to the city to see the chaos that Arthas left behind. She told Uther that Arthas was heading north. It was here that Jaina was approached by the Prophet. He told her that humanity needed to head to Kalimdor. Recognizing him and his powerful aura from his meeting with the Kirin Tor, Jaina took up the advice of the Prophet and took an expedition across the seas to find Kalimdor. Arthas would reach Northrend, where he met a dwarf expedition led by Muradin Bronzebeard, who were searching for the rumored Frostmourne. Arthas, needing all the help he could get to defeat Mal'Ganis, who he thought was the real mastermind behind it all, joined Muradin and his dwarves. During their search they faced many undead, but Arthas did not falter. At one point King Terenas sent an emissary from Lordaeron and ordered Arthas and his troops to come home. The soldiers rejoiced and started cutting their way through the forest that kept them away from their ships. Arthas would not allow this to pass. He would make his way through the undead encampments, hiring mercenaries and burning the Alliance ships. Then he would blame the burning on those mercenaries alone, causing the enraged Alliance soldiers to kill them all. Arthas would later find Frostmourne and take it, even though Muradin warned that the blade was cursed. When he took up Frostmourne, the shattering of the ice encasing it seemingly killed Muradin. Arthas would then lead the charge against Mal'Ganis, finally seemingly defeating the Dreadlord. Of course, Mal'Ganis, being infused with the powers of Fel, would just go to the Twisting Nether, only to return in the future. Muradin Bronzebeard was not actually dead, but he did lose his memory, and he would start to wander the icy wastelands of Northrend. A lot of time would pass and Arthas would be maddened by the voice of Ner'zhul coming from the blade, to the point that Arthas became a servant of the Lich King. He came back home, killed his father King Terenas, and then led the undead army in destroying what was left of Lordaeron. Another Dreadlord, Tychondrius, would instruct Arthas to search for the spirit of Kel'Thuzad. To bring him back, they needed a powerful urn, which turned out to hold his father's ashes. It was held by Uther, who Arthas promptly murdered as well. To resurrect Kel'Thuzad, the Scourge would need a fount of strong magic. The only logical and close choice was the Sunwell in the kingdom of Quel'Thalas. Sparing no time, Arthas invaded. They were met with heavy resistance from the High Elves. The defense was led by Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner, sister of the legendary Alleria Windrunner. She proved to be a formidable adversary to Arthas. Arthas would resort to the most cruel of methods of war, razing down villages and even building a bridge out of corpses. Despite Sylvanas' best defenses, Arthas was approaching the Sunwell. They faced each other in combat and Arthas easily disposed of her, but instead of killing her, he took her soul and turned her into a banshee that he would then let loose upon the citizens of Quel'Thalas, forcing her to murder her kin. King Anasterian Sunstrider, the leader of the High Elves, would also fall in battle, and the Sunwell would soon belong to Arthas, who used it to resurrect Kel'Thuzad. The next target was the magical city of Dalaran, where they would steal the Book of Medivh to summon the Legion Lieutenant Archimonde. Dalaran and its mages fell easily, and Kel'Thuzad proceeded to summon Archimonde and the Legion, who then destroyed what remained of Dalaran. The purpose of the Scourge was now complete in Legion's eyes, but Ner'zhul had plans of his own and plotted to betray Dreadlords and the Legion when the time was right. Thrall and Vol'jin, along with their people, made landfall on Kalimdor while all this mess was going on in the Eastern Kingdoms. The seas were not friendly, so they got separated from Grom Hellscream and his contingent of Orcs. Their first taste of Kalimdor would be the vicious battles between the noble Tauren and the Centaurs. Cairn Bloodhoof, chieftain of the Tauren Bloodhoof tribe, offered to help the Orcs find their destiny by telling them the location of a mysterious oracle, but first the Tauren needed some help. Thrall and his horde saved Cairn's son, Bane Bloodhoof, and protected the Tauren while they migrated to a land known as Mulgore. Cairn then told them that the oracle was located at the Stone Talon Peak, where Thrall found Grom Hellscream battling humans. While Thrall would have preferred some discretion, Grom was joyous to find battle once again, and he constantly struck at the humans, provoking a full-on battle. To stop Grom from causing an all-out war, Thrall sent him to Ashenvale Forest to collect some lumber, while Thrall went up to the peak to find the oracle. At this time, Grom and his Warsong clan would be cutting down trees of Ashenvale, provoking the ire of the Night Elves, who were isolated from the rest of the world for the last 10,000 years, and at this point became creatures of myth. They would engage in battle which angered the demigod Cenarius, who came after the Orcs. During the battles, the Orcs found a fount of demon blood, Manaroth's blood. Grom and his forces drank it, and their bloodlust was back, as were their demonic powers. The fount was planted there by Tychondrius and Manaroth, who wanted to use the Orcs as their harbingers once again. Cenarius then fell to Grom's axe, but Grom's bloodlust wasn't sated. Thrall and Cairn would find the oracle, but to Thrall's surprise, they would cross paths with Jaina Proudmoore in the same chamber, and it would turn out that the oracle is actually the prophet, who then tells them that they need to unite if they want to defeat demons who are starting their invasion on Kalimdor, but also he warned Thrall of Grom's bloodlust. The humans and Orcs managed to reach an agreement and set out for their first mission together, purify Grom and the Warsong clan, which they did successfully. Thrall and Grom would then set out on a hunt for Manaroth and found him deep inside Ashenvale. They engaged him in combat, and Grom sunk his axe, Gorehowl, deep into the demon lord, causing the demon to literally explode, mortally wounding Grom. With Manaroth's death, the curse on the Orcs was lifted. Grom Hellscream would die in his friend's arms, liberating his people from the curse he first was afflicted with. Battles would rage across Kalimdor, with demons coming in droves and now reinforced by the undead scourge. Desperate to save her people, Tyrande Whisperwind would liberate Illidan Stormrage even after protests from his wardens, who Tyrande then killed. Illidan would prove to be a powerful weapon against the Legion, but his thirst for power would prove to get the better of him. While fighting the undead in the region now known as Felwood, he would encounter the fallen prince Arthas, who told him that the Skull of Gul'dan was somewhere in the woods, and that it was an immensely powerful artifact, but it was held by the Dreadlord Tychondrius. Arthas wanted to use Illidan to kill Tychondrius to ensure the independence of the Scourge. Illidan, of course, took the bait, killed Tychondrius, and consumed the power of the skull, becoming something between a demon and an elf, now having hooves and horns and wings. For this, he would be banished from the Night Elf society. Medivh would call upon Tyrande and Malfurion, who met up with him in a grove, where Medivh also brought Thrall and Jaina. Here he revealed his true identity, and told them that they must unite if they wished to stop the Legion. They reluctantly agreed. Even their united powers were almost not enough to stop the Legion, led by Archimonde. At the famed Battle of Mount Hyjal, Archimonde would break through the united army's ranks and would reach the World Tree Nordrassil atop the second Well of Eternity. Malfurion would call upon the spirits of the forest, who would swarm Archimonde and explode, finally killing him and ending the Third War. It came at a cost though. Nordrassil was dead, and the Night Elves lost their immortality. Medivh would consider his job done, and would leave the world in their hands. Kil'jaeden, worried now about the Lich King and the independence of the Scourge, reached out to Illidan and offered him even more power if Illidan was to kill Ner'zhul. Illidan called in a few favors with the former Highborne, now the Naga, and a portion of them led by Lady Wash answered his call. They were not there because of any depths or anything, but rather because it was the will of the old gods, who maybe feared death the most out of any cosmological force. Together they would make their way towards the tomb of Sargeras, all while being chased by Illidan's warden, Maiev Shadowsong. He was seeking an artifact called the Eye of Sargeras that he wanted to use to literally blow up Northrend. Tyrande and Malfurion joined the hunt, and they chased him all the way to the Eastern Kingdoms, teaming up with the remaining High Elves, now called Blood Elves in honor of their fallen kingdom, led by Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider. Malfurion would go and talk to the land and figure out what was going on, while the rest of the group chased after Illidan. At one point Tyrande was left for dead by Maiev, but Maiev kept up the chase instead of helping her. They tracked Illidan down to the ruins of Dalaran, where he was attempting to use the Eye of Sargeras to end the Lich King. He was, however, stopped. Malfurion sensed that Illidan's magic would tear the world apart. He also threw the supposed death of Tyrande at him, something which Kael'thas rebuked and said that Tyrande might still be alive. To rescue her, Illidan was freed once again, and the two brothers managed to save her. Illidan was exiled once again and left, with Maiev chasing after him. Illidan would go off to where the rift was opened to bring Archimonde to Azeroth, and use the remaining powers there to open a portal to Outland in an attempt to escape the wrath of Kil'jaeden once the Demon Lord would find out of his failure to end the Lich King. Kael'thas and his Blood Elves would join up with the remnants of the Alliance, led by Grand Marshal Garithos, who had extreme contempt for everyone not human. He would send the Elves on a suicide mission, from which they were saved by Lady Wash and her Naga. Garithos would then charge the Blood Elves with treason and imprison them in the Violet Hold, a magical prison below Dalaran. With the help of the Naga, the Blood Elves would escape to Outland, where they would find Illidan captured by Maiev and her Watchers, who followed him through the portal before it closed, leaving them stranded on Outland with nothing but their mission. Blood Elves and the Naga freed Illidan, forcing Maiev to retreat. Illidan would explain that he planned to become the Lord of Outland by defeating the Demon Lord Magtheridon and closing a few portals that the Legion was using to bring demons onto Outland that were left behind from the portal storm caused by Ner'zhul after the Second War. They were also joined by a tribe of remaining Draenei on Outland led by Akama. The joined forces dismantled the portals and raided the Black Temple from where Magtheridon ruled and secured their victory. Illidan would declare himself the Lord of Outland, but his triumph was short-lived as Kil'jaeden appeared and gave Illidan one final chance to defeat the Lich King. Illidan had no choice but to agree. Ner'zhul would begin to lose his powers over the Undead Scourge. Because of this, the Scourge was split into 3 factions, one loyal to the Lich King, led by Arthas, one allegedly loyal to the Legion, led by the Dreadlords, and the last one comprised of free-willed undead, led by Sylvanas Windrunner, who managed to get her will and her body back. Arthas would set sail to Northrend after being called upon by Ner'zhul. One of the Dreadlords, Varimathras, seemingly betrayed his brothers and joined up with Sylvanas. In truth, this was all merely a part of their plans. Sylvanas' army was also joined by Lord Garithos and his army of humans. Together they launched a siege upon the capital city and liberated it from the last Dreadlord left in Lordaeron, Balnazar. She ordered Varimathras to kill Balnazar, which he did with some seeming reluctance, but Balnazar was merely faking his death, as Dreadlords are masters of deception. Varimathras would serve as a Dreadlord spy in Sylvanas' rule of Lordaeron, serving his true masters. Lord Garithos and his forces were also killed, and now Lordaeron belonged only to Sylvanas, who proclaimed her people the Forsaken. She ruled over them in a prison/sewer complex beneath the capital city called the Undercity. On the shores of Northrend, Arthas would meet up with Anubarak and his Nerubians, loyal servants of the Lich King. They would make their way towards Icecrown, where they faced the forces of Illidan Stormrage. The battle was fierce, ending with a duel between Arthas and Illidan at the very base of Icecrown. Arthas would slice Illidan across the torso with Frostmourne, leaving him to die of his wounds while he made his way up Icecrown. Illidan would survive and would barely make his way back to Outland to recover. At the top of Icecrown, Arthas was finally in front of the Frozen Throne, where Ner'zhul was encased in his armor. Ner'zhul would call out to him to shatter the throne and put on the Helm of Domination. Arthas did just that, and as he put on the helm, he would find himself inside of his own mind. Here he would see a young blonde boy, Arthas in his youth, across from Ner'zhul. Ner'zhul told Arthas that now he had to choose between his humanity and Ner'zhul. Arthas promptly killed the boy, causing Ner'zhul to cheer, but shortly thereafter, Arthas killed Ner'zhul as well. Now there was no more Arthas and no more Ner'zhul. There was only the Lich King. He would cut out his heart and bury it deep below Icecrown, and the entire region would be turned into a massive fortress, which would from then on be known as Icecrown Citadel, made from the blood of Yogg-Saron, one of the old gods buried nearby. Arthas would gather his powers and would go into a slumber that would last for a few years. Illidan came back to Outland licking his wounds, and over the years he would train many Illidari in the fight against the Legion. Upon spying on the Legion world of Argus, his astral form was caught by Kil'jaeden. He was saved from this ordeal by an Elder Naaru. The Naaru are beings of light who are pretty much light's equivalent of what the Titans are to the forces of order. The Naaru gave him a vision. He would be infused with the light and would destroy the Legion. The vision was unsettling to Illidan, but still he survived and tightened his grip on Outland. After the Third War, Thrall took a piece of the desert land on the eastern shores of Kalimdor for his people. He took this region because it reminded him of the Orcs' savage home. The Horde was back, but now as a more peaceful faction, comprised of Orcs, Trolls and Tauren. The region the Horde took for themselves would be called Durotar, in honor of Thrall's father, while the capital of the Horde would be called Orgrimmar, in honor of Orgrim Doomhammer. The building of Orgrimmar had some troubles, most notably when Lord Admiral Dalin Proudmoore of Kultiras wanted to invade as revenge for his son's death during the Second War. Jaina, his daughter and the leader of the Alliance Kalimdor settlement of Theramore, pleaded with him not to attack, but he didn't listen. Wanting to keep the peace, Jaina stood by as her father was killed, causing her to be shunned by the people of Kultiras, who would promptly leave the Alliance. The Night Elves also made a new home for themselves in the New World Tree Teldrassil, just off the northwestern coast of Kalimdor. In its boughs they built the city of Darnassus, and they would join the Alliance. King Varian Vryn would be called by Jaina to Theramore, where the relations between the Horde and the Alliance would be discussed. On the way though, the king was kidnapped by the Defias Brotherhood. He was taken to an island where Onyxia did a spell on him that separated Varian into two personalities, wanting to use one to rule Stormwind as a shadow ruler behind the scenes, while killing the more rebellious of personalities. A struggle ensues and the rebellious Varian falls off a cliff. Later he would wake up on the shores of Kalimdor, suffering from memory loss. He would be found by an orc gladiator trainer and would be enslaved as a gladiator. He would prove himself a capable fighter and would be named Logash, Ghost Wolf. In his place, young Anduin was named king, with the Alliance champion Bolvar Fordragon serving as regent lord. Logash would free himself of his gladiatorial chains and would go on a search that would take him across Azeroth to find his identity. While Varian was missing, many important things on Azeroth took place. The Alliance and the Horde were in an uneasy truce. Sylvanas and her Forsaken managed to join the Horde with the help of the Tauren, after not even having a chance with the Alliance, because their envoys were killed on sight. The old god Cthulhu would also be acting up, and he was dealt with by the heroes of Azeroth. The Scourge would still be rampaging throughout the Plaguelands, even though the Lich King was hibernating, and they were led by Kel'Thuzad in place of Arthas. The human remnants of Lordaeron formed the Scarlet Crusade, a fanatic group of light-following humans who wanted to rid this world of all undead. Also, in northern eastern kingdoms, a curse would spread out, causing humans to become worgen. To make matters worse, the Dark Portal would be reopened by Doom Lord Kazakh, who wanted to start another Legion invasion. The forces of Alliance and Horde marched through the Dark Portal in order to stop this. Many things changed on Outland now that Illidan was their lord. Hellfire Citadel, once a throne of the Orcish Horde, was used by Illidan to enslave the remaining Orcs on Draenor, infusing them with blood of Magdarodon, who he kept beneath the citadel. Lady Wash ruled over Serpentshire Caverns, where she held the water supply of the entire world in her hands. Kael'thas and his Blood Elves stole a fleet of Draenei spaceships, with only one managing to escape, the Exodar, which was sabotaged and later crashed on Azeroth. On board of Exodar was Prophet Velen and some of the Draenei, who then joined the Alliance. Blood Elves, remaining on Azeroth, now led by Regent Lord Lor'themar Theron, in turn joined the Horde. That was not the only thing going on with Kael'thas, as he was constantly being enticed by Kil'jaeden, who promised that fell magic could sate the Blood Elves' magic addiction. Relations between Illidan and Kael'thas would turn sour, and Kael'thas would give himself unto fell magic. Some of his elves defected and made a home in Shattrath City, a major hub for the Naru, Draenei, and Sons of Lothar, the remains of the Alliance forces on Draenor after the Second War. Akama had also become disillusioned with Illidan, seeing him as just another demon master now, so he betrayed him and joined forces with Maiev Shadowsong. Illidan was busy training the Illidari, who he had sent out across many Legion worlds. Alliance and Horde would meet many Second War heroes in the shattered world of Outland, such as Khadgar, but Turalyon and Illyria were still missing. They would free Outland of Illidan's influence while beating back the Legion, taking over all his holds until the Black Temple was all that remained. In the region of Nagrand, Thrall would meet young Garrosh Hellscream, son of the late Grom Hellscream. Garrosh was ashamed of his father's legacy, considering him a traitor to their people for drinking the corrupted demonic blood first. Thrall told him how, yes, his father did bad stuff, but ultimately he was an orc hero. Thrall took Garrosh into the fold and would teach him of the Horde and of his father. Here he also met a woman called Agra, who he fell in love with. Eventually the heroes of Alliance and Horde broke into the Black Temple, where they faced many monstrosities, including Teron Gorefiend. During this time Illidan would send his Illidari to find the Sargerite Keystone, which could be used to access any Legion-controlled world. At the top of the Black Temple, heroes would find Illidan meditating with the skull of Gul'dan. He would be defeated and killed, just as the Illidari were coming back from their mission with success. But they would be gathered by Maiev, who would take them into prison, their master's body, as well as the Sargerite Keystone. She would take them back to Azeroth, to a prison called Vault of the Wardens. Ultimately, Illidan had good intentions. He wanted to defeat the Legion, but he did it by enslaving most of Outland, and most just knew him as another demon lord. Alliance and Horde went back to Azeroth, with Sons of Lothar coming back as well, finally being able to return home after 2 decades. Kael'thas survived his defeat thanks to a priestess who used fel powers to keep him alive, basically planting a huge fel crystal into his chest. He returned home to Azeroth, where he took over the Isle of Quel'Danas, where the Sunwell was located, intending to use it to summon the Legion. The adventurers assaulted the Isle, defeating all demons and corrupted elves, and finally taking care of Kael'thas for good. They made their way to the Sunwell, where they came just in the nick of time to see Kil'jaeden coming through, though Kil'jaeden was ultimately defeated and the Legion invasion was prevented. Gladiator Logash would find his way to Terramore, where he met with Jaina and Aegwynn, who discovered that he is in fact the missing king of Stormwind. Back in Stormwind, the doppelganger Varian would appear and announce himself the king. Logash would come to Stormwind and Onyxia would finally reveal her true form, not that of a noble human woman, but that of the daughter of Deathwing. 2 variants would lead the way to Onyxia's lair, where they finally faced their manipulator. She would attempt to cast a spell to destroy Logash, but the second variant jumped into the blast and the spell fused them back together. Now 1 variant, he fought against Onyxia and cut her head off in one swift blow. Later, Varian would finally make his way back to Terramore to attend the Peace Summit, with Thrall coming along with Garrosh Hellscream as his protege. This meeting was cut short though, because another threat just arose. The Scourge was starting to make moves. The Lich King awoke after years of hibernation and was ready to unleash the Scourge upon the world, spreading the plague through grain just as was done before. He also trained an elite force of 2nd generation Death Knights of all races who would lay waste to the Scarlet Crusade. They also had a mission to attack Lightshope Chapel, where Tyrion, now a leader of the Argent Dawn, which was a joint effort by all races to spread the light and destroy the Scourge, defeated his Death Knights. The spirits buried under Lightshope would also come out and convince Death Knights that they were on the wrong path. Death Knights would declare their independence and join the Alliance and Horde. The 2 factions would send their forces to Northland to attack the Lich King on his territory. Alliance forces were led by Bolvar Fordragon, and the Horde forces were led by Garrosh Hellscream. City of Dalaran was finally rebuilt and was made to float in thin air by the mages of Kirin Tor. Now proclaimed a neutral territory, the city would serve as the main hub of operations during the Northrend campaign, floating over Crystal Song Forest. The campaign across Northrend would face many setbacks. Blue Dragon aspect Malygos would try to stop the mortals from using magic, sparking the Nexus War, where he was defeated, scattering the Blue Dragonflight across the world, while a dragon called Kalagos would be the de facto leader of those who remained within the Blue Dragonflight, and a portion of them would leave on their own. Arthas corrupted many races across Northrend, so those had to be dealt with as well. Along the way, Moradin Bronzebeard was also found and his memory was returned. Alliance and Horde would strike at the entrance to Icecrown, a place called Wrathgate. The offense would be led by Bolvar Fordragon and Dranosh Sourfang. They would face the Lich King in battle, who promptly killed young Dranosh and took his soul. Everyone would be caught by surprise when a forsaken apothecary called Putris betrayed the Horde and sent out a new plague he created that kills both the living and the dead. Arthas would barely escape, but the rest would die. Dragons quickly came to contain the plague and burned everyone alive. But Arthas was not done with them yet, so he took the burned body of Bolvar, who was kept alive, and tortured him, chaining him just above the frozen throne. He would also raise Dranosh as a Death Knight. Back in Undercity, Putris took control, sparking a civil war, where Imathras also betrayed Sylvanas openly, but the Horde was helped by the Alliance, and Sylvanas regained control of the Forsaken capital. Bran Bronzebeard, famed dwarf explorer and a brother of Moradin, led an expedition to the Titan city of Ulduar, where the heroes of Azeroth literally stopped the end of the world. While exploring Ulduar, the heroes of Azeroth also found out that it held the imprisoned old god Yogg-Saron, who was defeated with the help of Titan Keepers. A championship would be held, called the Argent Tournament, held by the Argent Crusade, the united forces of the Order of the Silver Hand, and Argent Dawn, to see who was the most heroic and who would be given the honor of attacking Icecrown Citadel. It was time to strike at Icecrown, so Tyrion led the charge and the united forces of Alliance and Horde quickly made their way up the citadel, all while hearing Bolvar's tortured screams. Of course, Alliance and Horde would turn to infighting, but they made peace after they faced Garrosh, who was killed, leaving his father Varrock Saurfang broken for a long time. Varian told his soldiers to put down their arms and let Varrock take his son so he can have a warrior's burial, displaying true honor to Varrock Saurfang. Finally, it was the time to fight the Lich King. Here he tells the heroes that this was all part of his plan and that he wanted to get the best of Azeroth to him so that he can raise them as his most elite force. He almost does this. He encases Tyrion in a block of ice and even kills all the heroes that were there. Tyrion would say a prayer to the light, free himself of the ice, and shatter Frostmourne with his powerful light sword called Ashbringer, dealing a killing blow to Arthas and resurrecting the heroes. King Terenas' spirit would appear and would tell Tyrion that there must always be a Lich King if the Scourge was to be kept in check. Bolvar would be freed from his chains and would demand from Tyrion that he, Bolvar, should wear the Helm of Domination, while the rest of the world should believe that the Lich King was dead and that Bolvar Fordragon died with him. Tyrion reluctantly obliged, putting the helm on Bolvar, and now Bolvar would be proclaimed the next Lich King. Arthas' soul was caught by the spirit of Uther. After his death, Uther was sent to the Shadowlands and became a Kyrian, who were trained to take the souls of the dead to the Arbiter so that their fate would be decided. Instead of taking him to the Arbiter, Uther, at the behest of a Kyrian called Devos, who believed that the Kyrian leadership was blind to Zovaal's corruption on the mortal realm, goaded Uther to throw Arthas into the maw, damning his soul forever. Throughout the last couple of years, Xavius, former advisor to Queen Azshara, who was now in league with the powers of the Void, would start to corrupt the Green Dragonflight and the Emerald Dream, a mysterious plane of existence that contains a version of Azeroth untouched by mortal hands. It's heavily implied that the Emerald Dream may actually be a place in the realms of life. Whatever the case, Xavius would start turning this Emerald Dream into the Emerald Nightmare and the Green Dragons into Nightmare Dragons. He would make a few strikes here and there, but he really got into it between the war against the Lich King and the Cataclysm, when he spread the nightmare throughout the mortal world on Azeroth. He was ultimately defeated but managed to survive, and soon enough he would make new plans as to how to corrupt Azeroth to the powers of the Void. Despite being a servant of the Void, however, he was willing to ally himself with the Burning Legion. More on that later. Not too long after, Deathwing would make his big return. All this time he was hiding in Deepholm, the elemental plane of Earth. He broke out of Deepholm, shattering the barriers between Azeroth and the elemental planes, causing chaos and an elemental war which would be known as the Cataclysm. It had catastrophic environmental consequences, and Deathwing going out and causing fires everywhere certainly didn't help. Thrall would leave his post as war chief to join the Earthen Ring, a powerful group of shaman, to discover how the land can be healed, and in his place he gave the mantle of war chief to Garrosh Hellscream, who didn't exactly want it, but Thrall didn't really give him any choice. This was a very unpopular decision by many in the Horde, but still some gave him a chance. It didn't help that his reputation was constantly tarnished by the Twilight's Hammer's cultists, who killed Alliance and Horde druids and framed Garrosh for the murders, causing Cairn, the chieftain of the Tauren Bloodhoof tribe, to challenge him to a Mak'gora. Magatha Grimtotem, a dark Tauren shaman, asked to bless Garrosh's axe. What Garrosh didn't know was that she laced it with poison, wanting to use Garrosh as a tool to take over the Tauren. Cairn died after being unwittingly poisoned by Garrosh. After further inspection of the axe, Garrosh and Aetrig concluded that it was poisoned, so Magatha could not count on him to secure her position as the leader of the Tauren, and she was quickly challenged by Cairn's son, Bane Bloodhoof, who brought back the Tauren under Bloodhoof leadership. Magni Bronzebeard, leader of the Ironforged Dwarves, would attempt to communicate with the core of Azeroth, however he turned into a literal diamond below Ironforge. Because of the elemental upheaval, relations between the Horde and the Alliance quickly went down once again, as they would be fighting each other again, this time for precious resources that were starting to plummet. Garrosh ordered Sylvanas to take over the until then closed off kingdom of Gilneas. The Greymane Wall was shattered because of the Cataclysm. Before she did this though, she went up to Icecrown Citadel. Seeing the new Lich King on the frozen throne slumbering and the shards of Frostmourne, she decided that there was nothing more to live for. so she jumped off the peak of the citadel to her death, while angelic Valkyr who served the Scourge flew above her. Her soul would be sent to the Maw, where she would meet Zovaal, who told her about how the afterlives were unfair, how she was sent to the Maw for stuff she was forced to do by Arthas, while showing her how Zul'jin, who led the Amani trolls who tortured the High Elves, was given a chance at repentance. He showed her how families were separated for all eternity, something that was very important to her. In the end he gave her 5 prophecies. A great evil would come back, she would have to lead, a blade would pierce the heart of the world, she would hold the blood of the world and would topple a king and shatter the skies. He told her how she can come back to life, but he also gave her the 9 Valkyr. However, for her to come back, one of the Valkyr would have to remain in the Maw to be tortured in her place. Essentially, she now had 9 lives. She came back and started using the plague with her Valkyr to raise more Forsaken, something that Garrosh was vehemently against. But she still kept on doing it. Sylvanas attacked Gilneas and blasted through the city, and at the same time an ancient curse would befall the citizens of Gilneas and they would start turning into Worgen. Sylvanas would reach King Greymane and would attempt to kill him, but her arrow was stopped when Greymane's son jumped in front of him, taking the hit and dying shortly thereafter, with Sylvanas escaping. The Worgen of Gilneas would find help with the Night Elves and would soon be welcomed into the Alliance. There was still a sect of Highborne out and about in the Night Elf society, those who evaded exile 10,000 years ago, but were still shunned by the rest of the Night Elves. There were plans to bring them back into the fold, however Maiev Shadowsong heavily objected to this, resorting to even attempting to murder Malfurion Stormrage. The reason for Maiev's contempt of the Highborne is because Illidan was among their ranks before he turned to demonic magic, and as you all know, there is nothing Maiev hates more than Illidan. Despite her best efforts, the Highborne were welcomed back into Night Elf society, while she would fail to assassinate Malfurion, running away to the Vault of the Wardens. The Bilgewater cartel of goblins would mine on their island of Khazan and would by accident find Azerite, the lifeblood of Azeroth, which caused the volcano on the island to erupt and they would have to flee. However, they would find refuge within the Horde. The finding of Azerite was a top secret and the eruption was blamed on the Cataclysm. Heroes of Azeroth would be called once again to fight for the world, dealing with the mad elementals, twilight cultists in service of Deathwing, and the old god minions, and evil dragons of course. Deathwing wanted to bring about the Hour of Twilight, which was pretty much the end of the world and a decisive victory for the Void. During the Cataclysm, a red dragon called Riastraja would be studying black dragon corruption, specifically one egg, for whose safety she gave her life. This was one of the rare, uncorrupted black dragon eggs. It would then be sent on to Ravenhold, where it would be kept safe, and a bit later an uncorrupted black dragon would be born, Wrathion. He would set out on a hunt, hunting every corrupted black dragon, wanting to restore glory and purpose to his Dragonflight. After dealing with the elements, it was time to deal with Deathwing. An idea was brought forward that the dragon soul could be used, but as it was destroyed, the only way to get it back was to travel back in time to the War of the Ancients and obtain it before its corruption to Demon Soul. Before the heroes could travel back in time though, the infinite Dragonflight was causing issues with time travel. They are a group of corrupted bronze dragons who want to twist time to their own ends, and in a possible future where Deathwing won, the heroes of Azeroth meet and defeat their leader, Murozond, the corrupted leader of the Bronze Dragonflight. The champions of Azeroth go back in time and obtain the Dragon Soul, after which they return to Northrend and face the Destroyer. They chase him down to Maelstrom, where Deathwing is finally defeated. The dragon aspects will then give up on their powers, losing their fertility in the process, and declaring that the Age of Mortals was about to begin. Agra and Thrall would also be expecting their first child. The defeat of Deathwing didn't mark the end of the war between the Horde and the Alliance though, as battle raged on. During a naval battle, they would by accident crash into the lost continent of Pandaria, which was enveloped in mists for 10,000 years after the War of the Ancients. Denizens of Azeroth were familiar with the Pandaren, the race native to Pandaria, as there was a group of Pandarans who came from a place called the Wandering Isle that would mingle with the rest of Azeroth from time to time, with some even joining the Horde and the Alliance. The arrival of Alliance and Horde on Pandaria awoke an ancient evil, sentient lifeblood of the old god Isharj called Shah, who lived and thrived off bad emotions. As a reminder, Isharj was the strongest old god and one the Titans had to pluck from Azeroth that would leave a wound that would eventually become the Well of Eternity. Despite this, the two factions would still battle. Prince Anduin Wrynn also arrived on Pandaria, crashing on the continent, where he met Wrathion. Two became quick friends and spent time together in an inn in Pandaria. While Alliance and Horde were battling and dealing with old god minions, the Zandalari trolls of the famed Zandalari Empire came to Pandaria as well, and resurrected Lei Shen, an ancient emperor of a race called the Mogu, who in times past used the Pandaren as slaves. After dealing with Lei Shen, his heart was brought to Wrathion, who promptly ate it, as you do. Lei Shen took the power of Ra, one of the Titan Keepers, who received a message from the Titans at the point of their death. Now Wrathion was able to relay this message, and here it's revealed that there is a so-called final Titan, who would later turn out to be Azeroth. Wrathion was also aware that the Legion would try to come back, so he was very interested in seeing how the war between the Alliance and the Horde on Pandaria would turn out. The war would take a turn for the worse as Garrosh Hellscream became increasingly tyrannical. At one point, he detonated a mana bomb on Terramore, killing everyone there, including Ronin, who saved Jaina Proudmoore at the last minute. Jaina in turn almost drowned the entire city of Orgrimmar, but was convinced to lay down her arms by Kalegos and Thrall. Jaina, however, went to Dalaran and killed everyone loyal to the Horde who didn't manage to escape. Garrosh would quench any signs of rebellion, killing those he deemed traitors, and the Horde quickly grew to be more Orc-centered, though many Orcs were still unhappy with his rule as well. In a bid to take down the Alliance once and for all, Garrosh found the heart of Isharj and consumed its powers. The Alliance and Horde rebels would unite and lay siege to Orgrimmar, reaching deep below the depths of the city, where Garrosh carved out his base of operations. Here Garrosh is defeated, but just as Thrall was about to strike the killing blow, he was stopped by King Varian, who wanted to serve justice to Garrosh himself. In the end, it was decided that Garrosh would stand trial in Pandaria. Jaina wanted Varian to dismantle the Horde then and there, but he stayed his blade. Vol'jin was pronounced the next warchief, being the first warchief of the Horde not to be an Orc. Wrathion lost it when he heard this, as the war now had no clear victor who could protect the world from Legion's return. Soon, though, he hatched a plan with a dragon called Kairos Dormu, who would turn out to be an infinite dragon. They would sabotage Garrosh's trial, free him and send him to countless other alternate timelines, where he could collect countless numbers of hordes and bring them to Azeroth as its defenders. Of course, this was Wrathion's plan. Kairos Dormu had a plan of his own, and Garrosh also had a plan of his own. The sabotage of the trial was a success, and Garrosh would escape to a pocket alternate timeline of Draenor 35 years in the past, before Orcs drank the blood of Manaroth. Upon arrival, Garrosh would kill Kairos Dormu and would go on his way with plans of his own. We need to take a short break to explain how timelines work in the Warcraft universe. So in the Warcraft universe there is one prime timeline, everything else would just be an echo of a possible outcome. The reason why Draenor took shape and why we were able to even return to it later in the story is because creatures from the prime timeline interacted with it, causing alternate Draenor from Warlords of Draenor to become sort of a pocket dimension. Essentially only the things that the main timeline characters interacted with have any shape to them. So everything beyond alternate Draenor doesn't exist at all, even though the characters from alternate Draenor will talk about it, but it doesn't really have any substance to it. Since no characters from the main timeline interacted with them, they don't exist. There is just a pocket dimension in reality. That's why when talking about the Legion in this expansion, the returning characters will be the same ones we talked about from before, not alternate versions of themselves, while the Orcs and the Draenei here would be alternate versions of themselves. It's a bit confusing, yes, but you'll see. True demons, meaning creatures native to the realms of disorder, live outside of time, as do other beings outside of reality, such as titans. So now that he was back in the past, Garrosh set out to stop the Horde from drinking the blood of Manoroth. He reached out to alternate Grom Hellscream and told him of Gul'dan's impending betrayal and just what the cost of Manoroth's blood would be. He didn't tell him, however, that he was his son from a future. Gul'dan would summon Manoroth, the same Manoroth from the Prime timeline that the Prime Grom had killed but was now back from the Twisting Nether, and the same thing happened as before. The Orcs gathered and Grom was called upon to be the first to drink the blood. This time Grom had refused and Manoroth appeared before them. Grom from this timeline managed to kill Manoroth as well, this time with the help of cool future tech that Garrosh showed him, just much earlier in his life, and again Manoroth would explode, shrouding Grom in a fire blast, but this time Grom was saved last second by Garrosh. The Iron Horde was formed, consisting of all Orc clans, and they would start building their own dark portal that would be used to travel to the Prime timeline and take it over. Gul'dan and a warlock called Terrongor, who in the Prime timeline became the Death Knight Terrongor Fiend, would be used as fuel for the portal. Dark Portal on Azeroth's side would now be rerouted to alternate Draenor, and the Iron Horde poured forth. A small army of Alliance and Horde forces was sent to defend the region, including known names such as Khadgar and Thrall. They beat back the Iron Horde and followed them through the Dark Portal. To stop the invasion they freed Gul'dan and Terrongor, not knowing that this would have even more dire consequences later. The Dark Portal was destroyed, and Alliance and Horde made their garrisons on alternate Draenor. They would receive reinforcements from the Prime timeline from time to time. Rathian would also follow the champions, keeping track of what was going on. Alliance joined up with alternate Velen and his Draenei, mostly through a young Draenei woman called Irel, who would lead the alternate Draenei after alternate Velen sacrificed himself. The Horde would ally themselves with alternate Frostwolf clan. The war against the Iron Horde would last for a while, and eventually Garrosh would be found in Aegwynn, where Thrall challenged him to a Mak'gora, where he used the powers of the elements to kill Garrosh. Because of his guilt with everything that happened with Garrosh, Thrall would find that after this the elements would start to abandon him. Gul'dan would corrupt a part of the Iron Horde, and this part of the Iron Horde would be led by Kilrog Deadeye. Gul'dan would take Grom as his prisoner, taunting him that he couldn't even stop the death of his son, something that Grom didn't even know about until that point. After that he would take over the Hellfire Citadel and would serve his Legion Masters from there. What remained of the Iron Horde united with the Draenei and the heroes from the Prime timeline, and they would ascend Hellfire Citadel, fighting against the now deformed Terrongor, freeing Grom and facing resurrected Manoroth himself at the peak of the Citadel. They would then chase fleeing Gul'dan to the base of the ruined Dark Portal, where a Black Gate was constructed, from which Gul'dan summoned Archimonde. Salty from his last defeat at Mount Hyjal, Archimonde gave his best, but was defeated once again. Before he died again, he sent Gul'dan through the Black Gate, as Gul'dan's service was not finished. Draenor was free, and the champions of the Prime timeline returned to their world. Gul'dan also arrived onto the Prime timeline, and here he was contacted by Kil'jaeden. The demonic lord sent Gul'dan to the tomb of Sargeras, from where Gul'dan opened a portal for the Legion to pour into Azeroth, starting the third invasion of the Burning Legion. Rathian's plan to stop the Legion backfired, and now he was the very thing that brought them to Azeroth. Gul'dan would also make contact with a traitor warden, and they would attack the Vault of the Wardens. Maiev Shadowsong, in her desperation, released all the Illidari, but the Vault of the Wardens was overwhelmed and the demons took the corpse of Illidan and the Sargerite Keystone, which, to remind you, is a key to all Legion-controlled worlds. Legion would attack settlements across Azeroth, and so the united forces of Alliance and Horde tried to strike at the tomb of Sargeras. This plan was a failure. They were flanked on both sides, causing Sylvanas to pull her archers, which provided covering fire for the Alliance. Many good soldiers died that day, including King Varian Vryn. The paladin Tyrion would be captured and would die later. Vol'jin, the warchief of the Horde, was mortally wounded, but Sylvanas managed to save the Horde with her Valkyrie and ships. Vol'jin would die of his wounds in Orgrimmar, but not before naming Sylvanas the next war chief. He thought it was a whisper from the Loa, deities of the trolls, but it was in fact Muezala who whispered this to Vol'jin, and Muezala was a servant of Zovaal from the Shadowlands. This was the first of Zovaal's prophecies that came to pass, and Sylvanas started to lean more onto the cause of Zovaal. Back in the Alliance, Anduin was pronounced king. During the funerals of the faction leaders, the Illidari would approach them and show them the demon infiltrators during the ceremonies, after which they were welcomed into the fold. Two factions made their way towards the Broken Isles on a quest to find the Pillars of Creation, which Khadgar discovered were powerful artifacts that would close the portal in the Tomb of Sargeras. Dalaran was moved above the Isles, being the main base of operations during the invasion. Horde was welcomed once again into Dalaran, something that Jaina was vehemently against, but being outnumbered, she left the city. Class orders were formed, seeing as the relations between the Alliance and Horde were at a low, and they managed to collect the Pillars of Creation across the Broken Isles. It came at a cost though, and many died, including the Green Dragon aspect, Ysera. Alliance and Horde would also clash, mostly in a region known as Stormheim, where Sylvanas made a deal with Helia, another servant of Zovaal, to bring her the Soul Cage, an artifact that could be used to corrupt uncorrupted Valkyr that served the Titan Keeper Odin. Greymane intervened and broke the Soul Cage, thinking that he was taking the future of her people. The Illidari managed to break back into the Vault of the Wardens and obtain the Sargerite Keystone. However, the body of Illidan was gone. Denizens of Azeroth would receive a message in the form of a depleted core of Zira, an Elder Naru, and this was a message from Turalyon. Turalyon told Khadgar and the champions of Azeroth that Illidan is the key to ending the Burning Legion. However, as he was dead, this would prove hard to do. Well, not quite. The Illidari found Illidan's demon soul in Helia's possession, and class orders managed to procure it. All that was left was finding Illidan's body. Gul'dan would be making moves, coming to the top of the Night Spire, the tallest tower in the city of Suramar, where he wanted to use Illidan's body as a vessel for Sargeras. The thing was, Suramar was in the hands of the Legion. However, with the help of some rebels, the heroes of Azeroth managed to free it. They climb atop the Night Spire, where they find Gul'dan in possession of Illidan's body and the last pillar of creation. Gul'dan was defeated, Illidan was put back into his body, and the final pillar of creation was obtained. Now all that remained was to attack the Tomb of Sargeras once again, led by Khadgar, Velen, and ironically Illidan and Maiev, and this time the effort was a success. The Pillars of Creation were set, however below the tomb the champions would meet the fallen avatar of Sargeras and Kil'jaeden. They would chase after Kil'jaeden and end up on his spaceship, where he was defeated. The spaceship would start to blow up in the orbit of Argus, but Illidan would use the Sargerite keystone to bring them home. This was not everything he did though, as he also opened a massive rift between Azeroth and Argus. It was time to invade the Legion. The Draenei built a vessel called Vindicar, and it was used to bring the forces of Azeroth to Argus. They would witness a crash of a spaceship that belonged to the Army of the Light, a legendary force that fought against the Legion across the cosmos. On their way there, they also met up with Alleria Windrunner and Turalyon after 2 decades. The thing is, for those two it was 1,000 years. Time moved differently in the Twisting Nether, and they were also given immortality by the Elder Naru, Zira, who was now slumbering because her core was sent to Azeroth as a vessel for Turalyon's message, but essentially she served as the supreme commander of the Army of the Light. She was now reawakened, and seeing Illidan attempted to infuse him with light. Illidan was totally against this and destroyed her with his powerful eye beam. Turalyon would attempt to strike at Illidan, but Illidan would just catch his blade and proclaim that they can only save themselves. Magni Bronzebeard would reawaken from his slumber, and he would tell the champions of Azeroth that Azeroth has a soul. But not only that, Argus had a soul as well, and it was in anguish. Counting victories across Argus, the only thing that remained was Antaurus, the Burning Throne, which was the seat of power of the Legion. Here the champions of Azeroth would save the captured Titan souls, and at the end would reach the World Soul of Argus, that was used by the Legion to resurrect demons quicker. All throughout, Sargeras would be inching closer to Azeroth. As said before, the reason why Sargeras never attacked Azeroth himself was because he had no idea just where it was. Now it was closer than ever. The Titans would bring the World Soul of Argus to the seat of the Pantheon, where they attempted to cut it off from the Legion. However, the soul was so corrupted that the World Soul of Argus had to be killed. After its death, Sargeras would finally appear, attempting to strike at Azeroth with his sword. He would be caught by the Titans in the last second, but not before he stabbed Azeroth at the region of Silithus. Illidan would stay behind as Sargeras' warden, while the rest of the group went home. The Burning Legion was finally defeated. Another important thing that they were not aware of at the time happened. Seeing as how Argus was so infused with death magic, he became a literal being of death. Because of this, upon his death, his soul was sent to the Shadowlands, slamming into the mechanical Arbiter and literally breaking the machine of death. All souls that would come to the Shadowlands after this point would be rerouted to the Maw, where Zovaal was waiting and getting more powerful, and in turn it was also making Sylvanas more powerful. Her next task would be to cause as much death as possible. Luckily for her, a new substance called Azerite, the literal lifeblood of Azeroth, that was a powerful resource, emerged, giving Sylvanas an excuse to start a war. Relations between the Horde and the Alliance would turn sour. A gathering of humans from Stormwind and their forsaken relatives for Undercity would be arranged. However, Kalia Menethil, the last living Menethil and the last child of King Terenas of Lordaeron, was in attendance as well. Some Forsaken preferred her as their leader, so they tried to defect to her side. However, Sylvanas killed them and Kalia Menethil, and also all the Forsaken that fled back to Undercity. Kalia would be resurrected by an Aru into a strange state of light-infused undeath. Sylvanas, with the excuse that she wanted to prevent the Alliance from getting their hands on Azerite, would launch an assault on Teldrassil. Her forces would cut their way through Kalimdor, with Varrock Saurfang being assigned a special task of killing Malfurion Stormrage. He would almost succeed, but he would release Malfurion last second, causing Sylvanas to flip out, after which she bombed the World Tree of Teldrassil, killing all civilians on it. Some Night Elves would also be raised as Forsaken. Tyrande, with no other option, took up an ancient and dangerous power of Elune and became the Night Warrior, infusing her with a lot of power that could kill her at any second. The Horde retreated, and now was the time for Alliance to strike back, so they gathered their forces and struck at Lordaeron. Sylvanas would use the plague in order to defend herself, even blighting her own soldiers and raising them as undead. Jaina would appear in the nick of time to clear the path forward, and the Alliance would march into inner Lordaeron. At Palace Gates, Saurfang would appear and would surrender to the Alliance, seeing no honor in this war. Anduin would then lead the way into the Lordaeron throne room, but Sylvanas would evade capture and would throw the plague on the city once again, this time making it completely uninhabitable, while the group managed to escape in the nick of time. Seeing as the Fourth War was now in full motion, two factions would need allies, many of whom came from previous conflicts. For example, the Horde allied themselves with Orcs from the alternate Draenor. However, they arrived many decades into the future after the events with the Iron Horde, and now there was a light-based theocracy on Draenor, which was tyrannically ruled by Irel. All non-believer Orcs were exterminated except those who managed to come to the Prime Timeline and join the forces of the Horde during the Fourth War. Within Stormwind Stockades, Princess Talanji and Prophet Zovaal of Zandalari Empire were imprisoned. Seeing them as good political bargaining chips, Sylvanas would organize an operation to free the two from Stormwind, earning the Horde the power of the Zandalari fleet. Knowing the power of such a fleet, Jaina would go and try to get the kingdom of Kul Tiras back into the Alliance because of their massive fleet. She would be captured on sight as ordered by her mother, Catherine Proudmoore. Back on mainland, Magni would lead the efforts of healing Azeroth's great wound, and would give the heroes of Azeroth a powerful necklace called the Heart of Azeroth. Catherine Proudmoore had a close friend and an advisor, Lady Aegwynn, who was secretly plotting against the kingdom. Heroes of Azeroth would find this out and expose her lies. Jaina would be freed and would lead the defense against Aegwynn and her forces, after which Aegwynn would surrender and go to prison, while Jaina would become the leader of Kul Tiras, proving her worth to her people in the defense of Boralus, the capital city of Kul Tiras. On the Horde side, they would find treachery as well among the Zandalari. As it would turn out, Prophet Zovaal was big into blood magic, even causing the death of the Loa of Kings, Rezan, and raising him into undeath. Zovaal served G'huun, which was an artificial old god created by the Titans by accident while experimenting in the Titan facility of Uldir, which then turned into a prison of G'huun. G'huun's corruption grew over time and blood trolls would grow to worship him. He was imprisoned in Uldir by a few seals, but many of them were broken by the Cataclysm, with the last one remaining in Zandalari capital of the Zar Alor. Zovaal would strike at the Zar Alor with the intent of overthrowing King Rastakhan. Seeing as his law was dead, King Rastakhan made a deal and bound his bloodline to the law of death, Von Samdi. Zovaal would strike at the Zar Alor, and while he would be killed, he managed to break the last seal of Uldir, making G'huun the next big threat that the Alliance and the Horde had to deal with. The Fourth War was truly a global conflict with major battles happening all over Azeroth, and now that G'huun was dealt with, the Horde and the Alliance were back to killing each other. Anduin knew many in the Horde were not fans of this war, so he released Saurfang from prison, hoping that he would start a rebellion. Saurfang would journey the world, evading assassination multiple times, until he made his way to Nagrand, where he found Thrall, now retired, seeing as how he could not wield the powers of the elements anymore, because of the enormous guilt he felt over everything that happened with Garrosh, as said before. Thrall even relinquished possession of Doomhammer to a shaman champion during the last invasion of the Burning Legion. Seeing as how he could not evade this conflict, Thrall would join Saurfang, and together they would raise the seeds of doubt among the Horde and rally those who did not want to follow Sylvanas' regime. In order to end this war, the Alliance lay siege upon the city of the Zar Alor. The siege was a success and King Rastakhan was killed, transferring the crown and ties to Bumsandi to his daughter, now Queen Talanji. During the Fourth War, a Horde adventurer would find Xal'atath, which was a sentient void artifact used during the third invasion of the Burning Legion by a Shadow Priest champion. Eventually, the dagger would lead the adventurer to the old god N'Zoth himself, who would turn out to be the main threat of the Fourth War. Xal'atath's spirit was released from the dagger, while N'Zoth would give a gift to the adventurer in the form of his eye that would follow adventurers' every move until they purified themselves of it. The dagger would then end up in Sylvanas' possession, which was then used as a bargaining chip with Queen Azshara herself, who finally made her big comeback 10,000 years after the War of the Ancients. Sylvanas would give the dagger to the Naga Queen, while Queen Azshara would take care of that pesky alliance. Azshara went to the tomb of Sargeras, where she found the Tide Stone of Golganeth, one of the pillars of creation, just standing around. Nathanos, the champion of Sylvanas, would take the Horde fleet out to the seas. The Alliance, wanting to end what remained of Horde's fleet, followed suit. This was exactly what the Horde wanted. When they were over the sunken remains of Nazjatar, the former Night Elf capital under Azshara's rule, she would use the Tidestone of Golganeth to part the seas, causing both fleets to tumble down into the watery crater. Now the big enemy were the Naga. She would obtain the dagger from Nathanos, which she intended to use on N'Zoth. Even though N'Zoth saved them after the War of the Ancients, the Naga were definitely not fans of being in service to the old god, especially not someone as prideful as Queen Azshara, so she wanted to open his prison and kill him with the dagger. Battle would rage across Nazjatar, while rebellion rumbled in the Horde once again. Sylvanas got a hold of the body of Derek Proudmoore, the Proudmoore's son killed during the Second War. She raised him into undeath in order to taunt the Alliance and demoralize the Kultirans. Bane Bloodhoof was not a fan of this, so he released Derek and brought him to Jaina at the ruins of Theramore. Jaina would later arrange Derek to be advised on his current state by Kalia Menethil. Sylvanas found this out and had Bane arrested upon return, and now he was awaiting execution under Orgrimmar. Both sides had groups that wanted to free Bane, and they would by chance meet under Orgrimmar while attempting to rescue him. The rescue was a success, and the Alliance and Horde would find value in unity, agreeing that Sylvanas is the real enemy. By joint effort, they would invade the Eternal Palace where Queen Azshara ruled from, and they would also face Lady Ashwayne here once again, this time horribly deformed. After dealing with her, they would delve deeper into the Eternal Palace and would find Azshara opening the prison of N'Zoth. She would be defeated, but not before she completely opened the prison, seeing as how she was now too weak to kill it. N'Zoth escaped and took her with him. Realizing that the true battle for Azeroth is in fighting N'Zoth, the joint forces of the Alliance and Horde would attempt to end the Fourth War by striking at Orgrimmar. Saurfang, not wanting to see more lives lost by the war, challenged Sylvanas to a Mak'gora outside the gates. However, Sylvanas was now really empowered by the powers of Zovaal from all the souls she sent to the Maw, so she easily killed Saurfang, but not before saying how the Horde is nothing and how they are all meaningless. She would then run away while Saurfang would have a funeral in the middle of Orgrimmar, with even alliance attending. The Horde leadership would from then on consist of a council of all racial leaders. All efforts would be now turned onto defeating N'Zoth, with Magni bringing a special advisor on board, Wrathion. Anduin was reluctant at first and even punched Wrathion in the face, but accepted it, seeing as how Wrathion would know the most about the old gods. N'Zoth wanted to bring about Ny'alotha, which was for now a vision of Azeroth under the old gods' rule, but he wanted to bring it into reality. Heroes of Azeroth would invade this vision, and here they would find Azshara captured and interrogated. After freeing her, she would give the champions of Azeroth Xal'atath's dagger, and would then escape. This dagger was later used by Wrathion to pierce the carapace of N'Zoth, leaving him vulnerable, after which it would seemingly disappear. The champions of Azeroth would then use a powerful Titan machine from Uldum, which channeled a beam into the heart of Azeroth, and the machine would finally destroy N'Zoth. Ny'alotha didn't come to pass, and the true battle of Azeroth was won. Somewhere during this time, Sylvanas would make her way up the Ice-Crowned Citadel, and would face Bolvar Foredragon, the Lich King. Sylvanas defeated Bolvar atop the Ice-Crowned Citadel and claimed the Helm of Domination. Instead of putting it on like Bolvar expected, however, she shattered it. The pulse of such a power returning to the Shadowlands broke the veil between life and death, and now the Maw was in full view above Icecrown, as was Torghast, the Tower of the Damned. As a reminder, to reshape reality as he wanted, Zovaal needed 5 sigils of the Shadowlands, so the next order of business was getting them, but he could not get them himself, so he needed worthy souls who could go to where the sigils were and obtain them. A few heroes of Azeroth were chosen: Anduin Wrynn, Jaina Proudmoore, Tyrande Whisperwind, Bane Bloodhoof, and Thrall. They were all kidnapped, prompting the rest of the Horde in the Alliance to chase after them, eventually making their way to the Maw. A few were freed and they made their way to Oribos, at the center of the Shadowlands. Shadowlands consists of many afterlives, some are even specifically crafted for certain souls. However, there are 5 most prominent ones. Bastion is a place where noble souls go to become one of the Kyrian who carry the souls of the dead to the Shadowlands. Maldraxxus is a place where most combative and brave souls go to serve among the Necrolords as the prime system of defense of the Shadowlands, and it is from here that the plague of undeath was smuggled onto Azeroth by the Dreadlords. Ardenweald is a place where creatures close to nature go and join the Night Fae. Revendreth is a place where bad souls go that still have a chance at repentance, that later join the Venthyr or go to a different afterlife, and the Maw is a place where only the most horrible of souls would go, those who weren't even given a chance at repentance in Revendreth, or those who were given the chance but failed at repenting. Throughout the eons that he was imprisoned in the Maw, Zovaal gained a mythical status among the denizens of the Shadowlands. Many would call him the Jailer, thinking that he was the one that was jailing the souls of the damned there. In the Maw is Torghast, the Tower of the Damned, where Zovaal kept the kidnapped leaders. The heroes of Azeroth would on a few occasions break into Torghast, where they freed the leaders of Azeroth who were kidnapped, except Anduin, who was held by Sylvanas herself, who hoped to bring him to her cause. As said before, at the center of the Shadowlands is Oribos, the Eternal City, where the Arbiter used to judge the souls brought there by the Kyrian. However, it was broken since Argus' soul slammed into her. The leader of Revendreth, Sire Denathrius, is the creator of Dreadlords and secretly a lieutenant to the Jailer. While the heroes were in the Shadowlands, they would meet many legends of Azeroth and Draenor's past, such as Lady Wash and Draka, who were powerful members of the Necrolords. Also, the Jailer was hard at work at corrupting each of the realms. Uther was corrupted as well, joining the Forsworn, a group of Kyrian who were against their customs of removing mortal memories. He was also unknowingly serving the Jailer by doing this. Kel'Thuzad was back as well. After his death, he was brought to Maldraxxus. It's hinted at that the Jailer had something to do with this. He was one of Zovaal's main lieutenants during this time. The heroes of Azeroth would also ensure the safety of the former Green Dragon aspect Ysera's soul while adventuring through Ardenweald. As all the souls were headed into the Maw, the Jailer's power grew, while the rest of the Shadowlands were experiencing an anima drought. Anima is basically the power of the soul, and it's what is used for the existence of the Shadowlands. The entire Shadowlands is basically made out of anima, and it's what's necessary for the Shadowlands to function. The more powerful a soul, the more anima it has. So for example, a person who spent their life just chilling around, not doing anything special, would have much less anima than say a paladin from the Second War. Shadowlands were even more at risk because the Primus, leader of the Necrolords in Maldraxxus, was missing for a while, leaving them more vulnerable than ever. While seeking the kidnapped leaders in Torghast, the heroes of Azeroth would meet the Runecarver, who created artifacts such as Helm of Domination and Frostmourne. The Runecarver had no idea who he was, as most of his memories were gone, but he was very good with using domination magic to create artifacts of power with it. He was able to make them some sweet new armor, and that armor was then used in the assault on the castle Nathria, the main base of operations of the Venthyr, as the treachery of Sire Denathrius was discovered. The rebellion was led by Prince Renathal. Denathrius was defeated, and his soul was then bound inside his blade Remornia, because even he was going to be given the chance at repentance, as was every soul in Revendreth. Along the way, the soul of Kael'thas was also saved. Sylvanas on more than a few occasions tried to talk to Anduin and make him see her point of view, but he still refused, prompting Zovaal to subvert Anduin to domination magic. He took Anduin's sword and infused it with the powers of Arthas' tortured soul, making it into a Mournblade, the same type of runeblade as Frostmourne, called Kingsmourne. While Ner'zhul, Arthas, and Bolvar were given a lot of autonomy, Anduin was barely given any, and was under almost complete control by Zovaal. Now it was time to get the sigils of the Shadowlands. Zovaal already had one sigil from Sire Denathrius, who gave it to him at some point earlier. The second sigil was obtained by Anduin, who stole it from Bastion. The third sigil was obtained by Sylvanas, who laid siege to Ardenweald. The fourth sigil was hidden in a secret part of the Maw called Korthia, and when the heroes of Azeroth found it, they brought it to the Runecarver in Torghast as to better understand it. Upon touching it, the Runecarver would get his lost memories back, and would discover that he is in fact the missing Primus of Maldraxxus. Zovaal quickly caught them and took the fourth sigil. The heroes and the Primus managed to escape, but time was running out, and Zovaal was already preparing to attack Oribos to get the final sigil from the Arbiter. Heroes of Azeroth would try to stop this assault before it began, so they laid siege to Torghast. Along the way they would find the soul of Garrosh Hellscream, who literally blew himself up with a powerful servant of Zovaal, going out on his own terms even in the afterlife. They would also fight and defeat Kel'Thuzad before reaching the top of the tower, where they faced Sylvanas Windrunner. Before she was defeated though, Zovaal sent out chains from Torghast to Oribos. The heroes of Azeroth would chase after them, and the fight would continue in the Arbiter's chamber in Oribos, and this time the day was won for Zovaal, who claimed the last sigil and opened a way to Zerath Mortis, now closer than ever to reshaping reality. Before he went through, he proclaimed that all shall serve him. This reminded Sylvanas of Arthas, and because she thought that she was an equal partner in this relationship, she sent out an arrow in protest. Zovaal was disappointed, but because she did help him get his sigil back from the Arbiter, he gave her the missing part of her soul back. We need to take a quick break to explain how souls work in regards to Mournblades and Shadowlands. So if you get killed by a Mournblade such as Frostmourne, only one part of your soul will go into the blade, while the other part will go to the Shadowlands. This is what happened to Sylvanas. The part of her soul that went to Frostmourne was a dark, hateful part of her, and that's why ever since she was resurrected, she had a much darker personality. Zovaal gave her back the brighter part of her soul, causing her to fall into a coma while Zovaal and Anduin went through the portal to Zerath Mortis, which closed behind them. Comatose Sylvanas was brought to Oribos. The heroes of Azeroth then had to reforge the 5 sigils in order to chase after them, and in doing so managed to fix many problems within the Shadowlands. The Kyrian no longer had mandatory memory wipes, and the civil war that's been raging there had ceased, and Uther's soul was made whole. The corruption of Ardenweald was stopped and Tyrande was cleansed of the Night Warrior's power. It's also revealed by Elune that she allowed Teldrassil to burn because she sensed the drought in Ardenweald and wanted to help her sister, the Winter Queen and the leader of the Night Fae in Ardenweald. It's also said that Elune belongs to the Pantheon of Life. Civil war in Maldraxxus also ceased and order was brought back to it. Dreadlords returned to Shadowlands and tried to stop the reforging of the sigils, but they failed and now the way was open for the heroes of Azeroth to follow after Zovaal and Anduin. Dreadlords also stole Remornia with their master's soul still inside it and took it to somewhere currently unknown, but you can be sure that we will see Sire Denathrius again pretty soon. The main order of business was defeating Zovaal. Zovaal's greatest power was his mastery over domination magic, so in order to combat it, the heroes of Azeroth, with the help of the Primus, reforged the Helm of Domination into the Crown of Wills that could be used to resist domination magic. Sylvanas also woke up from her coma and was now fighting on the side of the forces of Azeroth. They followed Zovaal into the Sepulchre of the First Ones, a workshop from where Shadowlands was created, which is tied to the other 5 realms of magic, where they faced Anduin and freed him from domination, while what remained of Arthas' tortured soul dissipated. They went deeper into the Sepulchre and they finally faced Zovaal in its central chamber, from where Zovaal was siphoning the soul of Azeroth. Seeing as how they could resist his greatest powers with the Crown of Wills, Zovaal was defeated and left a grim warning that a cosmos divided could not stand against what is to come, another threat in the future that might be tied to the 7th mysterious cosmological power. Shadowlands was still without the Arbiter, so a new one had to be created. Dreadlords attempted to sabotage this process but failed, and a Kyrian called Pelagos was made into the Arbiter. He was simply at the right place at the right time and chose to carry out that task. Because the new Arbiter was chosen, souls would cease going into the Maw, and the anima drought was stopped. Pelagos would decide to no longer send any souls to the Maw at all. Sylvanas would face her judgment, but Pelagos would let Tyrande choose Sylvanas' fate. Sylvanas was sentenced to go into the Maw and save every single soul there until all that remained was her. Sylvanas said her farewells and jumped into the Maw. In the epilogue of the events of Shadowlands, Anduin would be struggling with the things he did while being dominated, so he would seek the counsel of Sylvanas. Winter Queen would give Tyrande a seed that was infused with volunteering souls of the Night Elves that is probably gonna be used for a new world tree. Lordaeron was cleansed of the blight and a new leadership was formed, consisting of a council into whose ranks Kalia Menethil was also allowed to join, while the Forsaken Night Elves were allowed to go back to the Alliance if they so wished. The world would start to heal of its wounds and thus the Dragon Isles would awake, but that's an adventure that's yet to come. Phew, that was a really long video. I lost my voice, but I hope you learned something new. If I missed something by any chance, feel free to leave it in the comment section below and I will make a pinned comment that will aggregate all the stuff that I missed if I missed anything, but I think I have been pretty thorough. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I also have a few videos coming on each separate expansion. I already did 3 of them, so check those out. I will go rest my voice now and hopefully see you soon in the next one. Peace.